Sounds good. Okay, let's get started. Welcome everyone, whether you're joining us live or watching in the future from a pre-recorded video on YouTube. I want to thank you so much for joining us today to talk about how about smarter picks, smarter sorts, and the automation multiplier. I am really excited because I get to have two of the smartest people in the industry kind of like go back and forth about this topic and really kind of get into the nitty gritty about what it is that the current state of automation might be failing to see, right? I always go back to this, and I kind of talked about this on my LinkedIn post this morning. You know, people who only focus on ROI and labor reductions, they're not playing the game right. They have to go and expand their viewpoints. They have to go and expand what other key metrics are important and maybe even indicative of a process failure within your buildings, within yes, greenfield, but the one that we all have to go through, brownfield facilities. So I am super excited to be joined by Perry Fourrier from Beumer and John Crimmins from Plus One Robotics. So I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about who they are. So I am going to start with Perry.
All right. Thanks,
Tell us
Jose.
a little bit about yourself. Yeah.
Super. I'm Perry Fourrier. I'm with the Beumer Group, and I'm the senior sales manager for our parcel, courier, and express business. So we cover the entire market in North America, and that's primarily my role. I support in other areas as well. I've been in the industry a total of about 12 years in both parcel and aviation.
Oh, wow. So this guy definitely knows what he's talking about. John, what about you?
Yep. Thanks, Jose. And again, thanks, Perry, for joining us. So everybody, my name is John Crimmins. I'm a senior solutions architect at Plus One, and I also run our partnerships as well. So working with folks like Beumer and other companies on, our technology. I've been at the company now for about 3 years, but I've spent the last 6 years in the AI startup space. And before that, I've spent, a decade before that in the warehouse business working for Amazon Robotics. Actually, funny enough, Perry and I overlapped at Vonderlande back in the day too. So as they always say in this industry, you stay in long enough and you're going to see somebody else somebody else you know. So it has now happened to me, 12 years into my career. So it's happened.
Yes, the fulfillment world is kind of a both big and small town vibe.
Yeah,
definitely.
And then for those who might not be familiar with myself, I am Jose Hotema. I am the solutions and testing engineer here at Plus One Robotics. My job is essentially to kind of work between both development and end users and see, whether our applications are going to be a fit or where they fall short, and learning from that as well. So I'm super excited to kind of poke both of your brains today, because that will only help me and everybody on this call get a bit more familiar with some of the limitations of automation and robotics. Today we will focus our Today we will focus our discussion around how automation multiplies system performance, better induction improves sorter output, and building throughput. Number two, how sorters perform best with consistent feeds, and how a stable induction keeps lanes full and reduces those gaps. And number three, discovering value beyond labor savings, how warehouse automation improves predictability, workflow stability, and the total units moved in a building. A couple notes to get started. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will address them at the end. Also, today's presentation will be recorded, and we will send up a follow-up email to everybody that is in this call with a link to the recording. You'll also be able to find it on YouTube, so that if you couldn't make it today, you will bring your pen and paper to your own YouTube session. So let's move on to the questions. And we're going to hit the ground running here. So I'm going to start with Perry. Perry, when people think about sortation systems, they usually think speed. But what does sorter efficiency actually mean in a modern warehouse?
Yeah, so the automation of the warehouse, primarily through automated sortation. has brought tremendous improvements in efficiency. You mentioned speed, but that doesn't always mean throughput, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the efficiency coupled with the speed is how you get that maximum throughput. And since you mentioned inductions, it's very important that going from a manual induction to an automated induction, you get not just better throughput, but you get more accuracy. You get fewer misses in the system. So not only is the sorter able to move the material that has been identified properly to its proper destination, but it's able to do so by maximizing the space inside the sorter. So you get a much more efficient operation.
Barry, when you
Right,
when you guys are doing some of these systems, I mean, what are some of the metrics that you all look for success, but also like your customers are like, when we work with Beumer, this is what success looks like to us for our new system.
Yeah, so I mentioned efficiency, but that the reliability side of it, John, is key to the customers.
Okay.
Because the everything is so cyclical, right?
Yeah.
In the business. So you've got peak periods that everyone's familiar with from early November to early January. Everything's got to be operating as close to perfectly as possible during that period. But they need it year round because some of those redundancies that we built into the systems, so that if something goes a little sideways, they can still recover and they can still operate. So they look for the efficiencies, they look for the redundancies, and they look for that reliability, dependability in the system.
Cool. No, that's great to it's great to learn. As I said before, we've interacted previously in life, and it's great to talk to somebody who's an expert on this and get some knowledge out of that. So I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think part of what Perry is also kind of mentioning here, how the sorted technology really has came in and like turned the manual task of moving a package from one side of the building to the other side of the building incredibly, right? So here you can kind of see a video of how these sorters work. And if you didn't know, most automated facilities can process an order in about 45 seconds compared to 120 seconds in manual environments. This is according to the warehouse automation statistics at Gitnix. And here you can kind of see in that video just how fast these packages get added onto sorters. And something that I also want to take note of as people are watching this video is look how many empty spaces there are between the packages, right? This is what I'm talking about when I say sorter utilization. Here's one package, 5-6 spaces go in. Another package, some are pretty tight, like kind of like on this box coming up right here, there was 4 packages in a row. That is great utilization, but regardless, pay attention to those little gaps. And then kind of while we have this video playing, I want people to kind of watch this real quick, and I'm gonna go ahead and ask John Crimmins actually the next question. Okay, so what is the advantage of a multi-lane sortation system compared to a single lane approach? Here you have a singular lane running induct 1 onto a sorter, like we said like we established in the first one, consistent throughput and consistent sorter maximization. How does this multiply as you add more lanes?
Yeah, and I guess I'll clarify then for those watching that we're referring to when we say multi-lane, we're referring to having multiple lanes doing a robotic induction or automated induction versus, I think as we all know that are on the call here, you always have multiple lanes on a sorter, right? You need to, the first goal of any sorter is to maximize the sorter itself. And so you need to add these induction lanes in order to fill the sorter. So when we, look at doing a more automation around the sorter, because today you're doing manual inducts onto a spur and that goes onto the sorter. We actually look at robotics as a good way to both either augment or even sometimes replace labor because of the fact that robotics can kind of work at a very steady pace over a long period of time. And so what we've seen already in some of our installs for our own robotic systems is I think our customers kind of describe the best is it kind of like smooths out the business of the warehouse. And so normally you're very used to a giant lump kind of approaching a person. That person goes really fast. It pushes it downstream to another giant lump. And so what robotics can do to that, and what our systems can do, is ensure that that is now a smooth process all the way through the building. And what we've seen is actually further increases not only in building throughput but in sorter capacity as well. So go back to your question, Jose, of single lane versus multi-lane. We actually look at single lane more as you kind of compete with the labor aspect of it. Can a person do this faster or not? What's the labor compared to the capex spend there? When you multiple lanes of automation, you actually start to see more and more efficiency out of the system, and you get more throughput or more building capacity.
Right. That actually kind of brings up another good point. What does even, I guess, Perry, what does even a 1% increase in sorter utilization mean for the
Oh,
end customer?
it's significant, and particularly when you're looking, as I mentioned earlier, at the peak period, right? Because the volumes increase so significantly during those 2 months, and their revenue is so dependent on the maximization of utilizing that system. Like you said, filling up all those spaces on the sorter. They want something on every one of those cross belts so that as it goes through the system and it gets discharged to its destination, it can be refilled at the next pass. And another, I was just going to point out, another reason that the multiple induction lanes is really helpful is and this does happen, manual or automated, you can have a bottleneck, some sort of issue that can happen. And if you've got 4 of these inductions side by side, then you can take that lane down for a brief period to make the adjustment that needs to be made, but still keep feeding the sorter. So it's tremendously helpful to have that redundancy built into the system.
Right. No, great question. Great answer. Okay. And then
one more thing I'll add to that, Jose, because I think Perry's been talking about redundancy a lot. What we've also seen in some of our systems is how to not just deploy robotic systems, but to deploy them in such a manner that if a person needs to take over, they can also do that as well, or work in conjunction with the robots. And so again, going back to Perry's point about peak periods, or really it's the flexibility of the operation, is you'll allow whoever the end customer is to flex their workforce from an induction area, from clearing bins, from loading containers to kind of do bulk dumping into the system, right? They can kind of move that workforce more around. So again, you're essentially just kind of freeing people from doing one specific job and now allowing them to do multiple different jobs that are around that warehouse.
Correct. Yes, I do agree with that. During peak season, we have found something called hybrid mode, which is both a robot system and a human inductor at the end of the lane, to be really helpful during those peak seasons. Because for the human, it's a lot less of an actual physical load on the body, a lot less of a mental load on the body, but you still get the consistent reliability of a robotic system upstream of you, helping you with some of this load. Awesome. So let's move on to the next question. And I guess this is honestly for both of you guys. I'm assuming both of you guys, being in sales, being on the customer end, money is always a conversation, right? You would agree?
Yes,
would agree money is always a conversation?
Somehow I didn't think I had to verbalize that. Yes.
Yeah. We never get to go around finance. That's correct.
Correct. You never get to go around finance. So for companies that are evaluating automation, whether it's post a pilot or post 2 or 3 lane installations, what should they really think about ROI beyond just labor replacement?
Yeah, to me, that just starts the conversation, because that's the obvious point. That's the layup, if you will. Have it maximizing, as I pointed out a little bit in the question before, maximizing the capacity of the system is key, and it generates that revenue at the end of each sort day, or at the end of each sort, right? So that maximized utilization that comes from the efficiency of the automated induction and automated sortation is such a wonderful benefit to the end user, because they get that on a regular basis, day in, day out, shift by shift.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know if you guys know this, but warehouse turnover frequently exceeds 40% annually. That means facilities are constantly having to recruit and retrain staff. Warehouse fulfillment is one of those jobs that college students will take on for 2 months just so they can get
Yep.
their textbooks that semester and dip, right? So I think one of the great benefits to this is the ability for automation to absorb some of that labor strain while still
Yeah.
allowing people who are in the workforce concurrently to do higher level tasks. What do you think about that, John?
Yeah, no, I mean, you kind of teed it up well. You could almost look at a lot of this automation, and even, when you talk about like what happens before there are sorters in the building as well, it's almost like a workforce retention tool, right? It is a much more satisfying job to manage a couple of robot cells, or to be using your brain to doing something in the warehouse, or to operate a system, versus to kind of simply the terms that are used in the industry are out of the 3Ds: dull, dirty, and dangerous, right? Just slugging packages day in and day out for eight hours on end. And so again, when you talk to Jose about being able to, somebody kind of comes in and quits once they have their money and they run, how much nicer would it be to, instead of having that person come in and quit and run, and they now find value in saying, all right, I can stay around here for a year, see, and learn this new skill of managing a robotic workforce, or, managing, a sortation system, become an ops manager, something like that.
Hmm.
And then again, that automation becomes a retention tool in this way, not only just saving on labor costs or improving efficiency of the facilities.
Yeah,
Correct,
and I'll,
correct.
I'll
Yeah.
back I'll back you up on that also, Jose. The One of the main issues that our clients in the industry have is it's not just the employee retention. It's
Hmm.
that regular, they need them to show up every day. So
Right.
Mhm.
it's not always going to happen, right? And a lot of that
Hmm.
has to do with what we've all pointed out is employee satisfaction. So
Yep.
Mhm.
automation, where I think originally the perception of automation or robotics was it was going to take people's jobs. What
Right.
it does is makes the jobs that they do have in the warehouse even more enjoyable, even more
Right.
satisfactory, right? It's They're more likely, as John said, to look forward to coming to work, to enjoying the work while they're there, to
Yes.
improve their skills because of the expanded work capabilities that they have. And then if and when they do decide to move on, they got all these tools in their toolbox,
Yes.
right? That they would not have had if all they were doing is moving a box onto
Mhm.
a belt for eight
Yep.
hours.
Mhm.
Yeah, that is a great way to phrase that because it's something that I think is very key as to why I believe robotics is the answer and not the problem, right? I believe that some of these jobs are dull, dirty, dangerous, and could ultimately lead to a really dark place for any human being that's putting in 40 hours of move a day, moving boxes left and right, having unpredictable workloads. One day it's super easy, another day it's super hard. Automation stabilizes the entire operation. It makes the job predictable so that I can go home on a Monday and know that Tuesday is going to be more or less the exact same. So great way to phrase that, Perry. Okay, let's move on to our next question. Perry,
Yes.
talking about money, the sortation system is not a small ticket item, right? Let's just
No.
address the elephant in the room. What drives a company to invest in a sorter system, and what do those initial conversations look like?
Yeah. So it's again, you can always talk about the labor, the workforce, the dependability that you get from this type sorter. That's one of the first
Mhm.
conversation that tends to pop up. But it's the dependability, the predictability of the operation that comes
Mhm.
from that automation that is something that they know they can rely on every day, whether it's peak or not, right? Because when the system is engaged and the materials are flowing, they know they can see the numbers. They know what's happening. And if it happened last hour, they have a very high probability of seeing those numbers in the next hour, right?
Right.
It's
Mhm.
not when the shift changes, not when it's lunch, or whatever. So it's that regular benefit of seeing the numbers not vary too much throughout the day or from shift to shift. It makes their ability to predict the throughput and therefore the revenue that comes from keeping that material moving through the system that they can count on.
Right. No, that makes sense. And I guess what have you seen? How do you think customers have seen that number either grow or shrink before when they had a more manual operation and then a more automated operation on the operator side, right?
Is that for me or for John?
I guess that's honestly for you, since since you've installed
Okay.
some of these machines and you've taken some of these manual operations to full automation. What was the reception that you got after installation from the operators, right? Not even from the high ups. Did operators love them, hate them?
Yeah, so it's a little bit different when you're the supplier and you're really just visiting, but it's interesting to see the difference. They love the systems. They're so enamored with the automation. They love working with them. They love working around them. You can see the change in their perception. And when I've spoken with them, and I have asked a few people that some of the clients have worked with, do you like working with this system? Just point blank.
Right.
And the answer is always yes. And it's usually about, if it's working with no exceptions and the system is moving material through, it's just kind of, you can hear that hum in the background and they're fine. They're doing their work and everything. What really makes a difference is if there is something that needs to be done to improve or make a change because there was some disruption in the flow, say. They want to know that they can make changes, that the maintainability and the repairability of the systems is something that they can do quickly and effectively.
Right.
So
Right.
the design of the system is crucial because a modular system, for instance, is much easier to take apart and put back together, right? When you're, say, exchanging a carrier, taking a carrier out of service to put another carrier in the system in its place. If that can be done in 60 seconds, your downtime is almost nil. And so the system is still able to perform without a significant disruption in the operation.
Right.
And
No, that makes sense.
They love that. They love that because they can see the difference that it makes when they're able to get in there and fix something that's designed that well.
And John, I guess put your corporate hat on and be the other side of the coin. What does higher sorter utilization mean for the business?
Yeah, I mean, we visited this a little bit before, but at the end of the day, all these buildings and facilities throughout the country, right? They all have a cost per piece metric, and they're all trying to either save costs on a daily basis, or they're trying to get more throughput out, right? Or more packages out. Which again, when you do the math, right, you have a number of labor hours spent, number of items shipped, right, and that's your profitability for the building. So all of them from the corporate side, that's what they're going for, and so it's actually really refreshing to hear, Perry talk about, one of the benefits of a sortation system is that you have predictable flow. And so instead of having to maybe guess in a more manual operation where folks are walking around, you might have, whatever might be, pre, sorter installation, right? We're kind of trying to achieve the same thing with robotic induction. You basically have a very steady induction rate throughout your entire shift and not, again, these kind of, ups and downs. So to me, again, from the, corporate side of things, they're always going to care about my number of labor hours spent to do this number of, packages out my building, right? And that's always going to be the key thing. And however both of us can help that, as long as we both help that positively, then, we're winning in the customer's eyes.
Gotcha. And then if an end user or a facility that's looking to add automation into their building, if they wanted to start doing their own ROI calculations, are there calculators or resources that either of your companies provide to help with that ROI calculation?
Yeah, so I'll speak to one of our guys that works for Plus One. So Plus One a while back hired a director of finance, and I will say it's been one of the best decisions we ever made because I don't have to do any type of Excel modeling anymore, and he is excellent at it. So Plus One does these for a lot of our customers, and we've done some very, very intricate, unique models, whether it's a RAS-based pricing and CapEx, looking at sorter efficiencies and payback. So we have not only a ton of capabilities, but a ton of examples for folks. We're actually working with Beumer today to actually work on what that looks like for both brownfield and greenfield installations for automated induction. So I know that we have a lot when it comes to trying to help with the ROI discussion. Perry, I'm not sure how for when you all look at the ROI, like what do your customers look at when they say, all right, the sorter pays back or not?
Yeah. So one of the things that Beumer offers with our systems is a software platform called BG Insights that helps them see into the system, not just the operational factors, metrics, efficiencies, et cetera, but also how that can translate to revenue. So, and that's something they can affect based on the average value of the material that moves through, the weight, et cetera, right? So, and it's very flexible. It's very useful to the client. The ones who use it love it because they get that real-time information because they never know when they're going to get a phone call from someone at corporate who's over the eastern sector or something like that. And they say, what are you doing this month? What are you doing next month? And what they like to hear is, how are you getting so much through the system and generating so much more profitability through an efficient system where I don't see that in the other systems? And so BG Insight can give them that kind of insight so that they can answer those questions and make better business decisions.
Awesome.
Nice.
No, didn't know about that. That's great.
Okay. That is actually really, really great. We'll have to talk more about your finance tool. Would love to take a look at that.
Oh, I'll get a real expert in to talk to you about that.
Awesome.
That's good.
Okay, so moving on to our final question. So for either one of you guys, how does automation change the daily experience for warehouse workers and floor managers?
I'll jump in first here.
And I will throw in a quick little fact here for our audience. The average hourly wage in warehousing is around $26 per hour, meaning there's plenty of areas where productivity improvements could quickly translate into operational savings.
Yeah, I mean, so to me, when I think about automation, I think about first like how it's affected my own life, right? I mean, I am 36. I grew up in the time of AutoCAD and Excel spreadsheets, and all of my previous coworkers from the past talked about having to hand draft designs and drawings, right? And to me, it's like I did some very basic drafting in college, but man, how laborious would it be to have to do that for every time Perry comes to me with a new design and say, hey, design a robotic system into our sorter, right? And so I think of those types of automation changes for me have been very beneficial because I can do a lot more with my time, right? And I can, honestly have conversations like these, have webinars to talk about this as opposed to just dedicated to this, drawing things constantly. So if I think for folks that are in, a warehouse environment or in any type of, production environment, automation helps them in the same way, right? The very, laborious, boring things they are now able to kind of push off to the side or do very quickly, and they're able to do more valuable, more value-add things. So I always think of humans are most valuable when we're using our mind the majority of the time, and then kind of our bodies for the rest of it, right? And so when we're using our mind more and more, we're adding actually the best value that humans can add, right? Which is not necessarily, we always talk about like the hands being an extremely intricate thing of the human body, which they are, right? We can get into all the ways that, how, label facing is a problem, but, our mind is one of the greatest things ever. And so the more we can encourage people to use that and utilize that, I think you not only improve folks' wages in the warehouse, but you also kind of make them a more satisfactory worker as well.
Yeah. John, that automation arc that you just described, I was one of those people who at the beginning of my career, we were using vellum on draft board to put the drawings together for airframes, for instance, and modifications to aircraft. So it's come full circle, but your point is 100% valid, and I've got to see those changes throughout the decades as those manual tasks were made much more, well, they were just easier to do, quicker to do, resulted in better results, more accuracy across the board. It's phenomenal what it's done. And of course, to your question, Jose, that drastically improves the way people feel about the work they're doing, about the output, right, that they generate. And we touched on that a few times. One thing though that I think is interesting, particularly in the warehouse, that we really haven't touched on is safety. And in a fully manual warehouse, I mean, let's face it, it's not the safest place to work. And with all of the alerts and the parabolic mirrors and the rules for beeping the horns on the forklifts and things like that, the more of those processes that can be automated, perhaps even lifted up off the ground and completely out of the walkways in areas where people are moving, are a tremendous benefit and reduce a great deal the risk to each employee as they're working in the warehouse and enjoying those more satisfactory jobs.
I agree with that. Awesome. So thank you guys. That was the main end of our discussion where we talk about sorter maximization. Let's kind of start going. I'm going to do a series of rapid fire questions for each one of you. It's a little combination of both personal and professional preferences and just your own opinion. So don't think about it too much. Just kind of go for it. Okay.
This is dangerous.
Yes. Who wants to go first? Do I have any volunteers?
I'll go. Sure. Why not?
Okay. Okay, Perry, let's hit the timer and go. What is the first thing you notice when you walk into a new facility?
First thing I noticed is light and cleanliness, right? Just how well, the 5 S's. How good does this place look? Because that says so much about an operation.
Okay, and then would you prefer 1% better every day or 50% better every year?
Yeah, that's a great math question. I'd take 1% every day.
Okay, what matters more on a go live day? Uptime or coffee?
I'm praying for uptime. I've been at too many go live dates where we were white knuckling through the first 12 hours and hoping for the best.
Okay.
So the energy was not lacking. There was plenty of nervous energy.
Yeah.
And what is your favorite kind of customer?
Oh, so I don't mind tough customers. I really don't. But I love tough but fair customers, right?
Awesome.
People that we can work with, we can communicate with, and who we respect each other. So by far my favorite.
Perfect. Awesome. John, on to you now.
All right.
Okay. Name something that a human is still better at than robots today.
Thinking.
Thinking. Would you rather test everything or ship and learn?
Personally, I am a ship and learn person. I don't think my wife likes it as much, but that's what I enjoy.
Okay. Do you prefer speed or consistency for throughput?
Consistency. I think we've visited that a whole bunch here. Consistency is good. You can predict your revenue.
Yep.
Okay. What task would you automate in your own life?
What task out of my own life? Probably everything to do with laundry.
Okay. And for you, what is your go-to drink before you hop onto a customer discovery meeting?
Water and coffee. So
there we go.
coffee go. Yep.
Do you drink your coffee black or with creamer?
Oh, black. Yeah, always black. Hazelnut. We can probably have a whole one of these sessions on our coffee preferences. So
okay, everybody expect the next webinar to be the best coffee flavors for automation.
Yeah. Modex coffee preferences. Yeah.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. This was a lot of fun. I got to learn a whole lot about each of your jobs, preferences, views on the world, views on the industry. I really appreciate the time you guys took to come in here today. I am going to come over here back to any kind of closing remarks. I want to essentially just make sure that everybody's aware that we do these kinds of webinars on the third Wednesday of every month. We will be skipping the next one for because it's right around Modex. So if you guys have any questions or want to talk to us in person, make sure that you kind of take a picture of these events right here. This is where we're going to be. John, Lisa, the rest of the greater team will be at these events. So make sure you bring and stop by for our happy hours. Sign up for our happy hours and our lunch and learns. Our
And
next topic.
Jose,
Yep.
can I point out that Beumer will also be exhibiting in Modex? So if
Yes.
anyone wants to stop by before or after they come see you guys, we're going to be at booth B8713. That's B as in boy, 8713.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Perry. Yes, be sure to check out the Beumer group on LinkedIn and connect with Perry on LinkedIn. He loves to get random DMs on LinkedIn. He's told me himself. Feel free to cold call him at his phone. All of that.
Oh boy, here we go.
Thank you guys. John, if you have any other announcements that you want to make, or Lisa, this is your opportunity.
I'm good. I'll leave it to Lisa.
Awesome.
Yep, you covered it all. Thanks, Jose.
Thank you guys. And for those in the chat or listening in, if you have any ideas for what our next webinar topic should be, or you have some follow-up questions, still send them our way. We're hoping to be able to start talking about from zero to hero, how humans and robots are working together to meet the man. So see you then.
Cool. Thanks, Jose.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank you
Jose.
guys.